Yeah, Namaskar, and good afternoon and good morning, depending upon and where you are. I'm Dr. Nihar Patra, librarian IISER Berhampur. I'm pleased to inform you that since last year, the Central Library of the Indian Institute of Science Education and Research, that is IISER Berhampur, has been regularly conducting workshop and seminar in both physical and online modes. This is our 13 webinars within 1 year. IISER Berhampur is the youngest of the seven IISERs, was established in 2016 under the Ministry of Education, Government of India. This institute is dedicated to delivering high quality educations and pioneering research across diverse fields such as biological science, mathematical science, chemical science, physical science, art and environmental science, computer science, and with plans to expand into others fields soon. I extend my gratitude to our director, Professor Ashok Ganguly, for his kind support in organizing such event. He's currently traveling, otherwise he would have joined us to inaugurate these sessions. We are happy that our 500 participants registered for this events from 34 countries. Some of the countries include Greece, USA, UK, Brazil, Canada, China, Singapore, Egypt, Indonesia, Iran, New Zealand, Philippines, Russia, Sri Lanka, UAE, Turkey, Oman, Uganda, Zimbabwe, etc. So I have been eagerly waiting for the past 1 year to organize a webinar on this topic. And I am delighted to have Professor Vahid with us finally. He is an associate professor of language assessment at the National Institute of Education, Nanyang Technological University, Singapore, and honorary associate professor at the Institute of Education, UCL, London, and a visiting professor at Jiaotong University, China. Given his busy schedules, it was quite challenging to find a time that worked for him. I have been communicating with him since June 23 to make this happen. Today, the topic is Scientometric, the quantitative study of science, technology, and innovations. These fields hold a significant promise for measuring research impact by providing systematic and data-driven insight into scientific progress and collaboration patterns. However, it is also faces several challenges to address these issues. Professor White, a renowned expert in this area, is going to deliver his talk. His interests include generative AI in language assessment, meta-analysis, sensors technologies such as the eye tracking, brain imaging, and GSR in language assessment. Although such published his research in prominent journal like computer-assisted language learnings, language testing systems, current psychology, language assessment quarterly, assessing writings, educational assessment, and educational psychology. He also co-authored numbers books, chapters, and books published by Routledge, Cambridge University Press, Springers, Cambridge Scholars Publishing, so Wiley Blackwell's. By the led several assessments research projects supported by educational founders in Singapore, the USA, and the UK and Canada. He serves on the advisory board of multiple international journals and was awarded the International Academia Fellowships 2018-2019. He runs a YouTube channel named Statistics and Theory, which earned the Jones Strong's Social Awards in 2020 for its outstanding and innovative use of social media. Some of which notable grants include the instructional pilot study for research on early education and development in Singapore, growth in bilinguals and bilateral literacy proficiency, environmental education individuals, and experimental factors. Dr. Aryadoust has received numerous accolades, such as the honorary associate professor at the Institute of Education, UCL's London 2024-27, and being listed among the top 2% of world scientists by Stanford University in 2023. He has supervised and supervising 8 PhD students. So without further delay, I shall turn it over to the Professor Vahid to deliver his presentation. Professor Vahid.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Nihar, for the very kind introduction. And it's a great pleasure and honor to present this talk about scientometrics, everybody. My name is Vahid Aryadoust, and as Nihar mentioned, I'm an associate professor of language assessment at the National Institute of Education of Nanyang Technological University. Today is a cloudy day. I'm in my office, and I'm very happy to share my thoughts about scientometrics. So allow me to share my slides with you and then get into the idea of scientometrics. Okay.
Yeah, make it printable.
Right. Okay, so again, okay, can you see the slides in full format?
Yeah, not yet. Yeah, it is okay, perfectly.
Okay, very nice. Awesome. Okay, so my presentation, as you can see from this slide, is about the promises and challenges of scientometrics in measuring research impact. A brief background about why I became interested in scientometrics. Quite a few years ago, before the start of COVID, I always wanted to find out about the research fronts and intellectual bases, influential research studies in my field of research, which is language assessment. And I knew that it would be really an overwhelming task to read all the papers that have been published in the field and draw a conclusion and synthesize their major contributions. Then I was always looking for some kind of research. I had a chat with a couple of friends in one of the canteens here on the campus of NTU, and we were exchanging thoughts about how they do research, and they brought up the idea of scientometrics, and they explained what scientometrics is, and I said, oh, that's exactly what I need. So from then onwards, I started to learn about scientometrics. My primary motivation in doing scientometrics was really looking to my field of research to see what is going on the ground. So with this preliminary introduction to my background in scientometrics, I wanted to share with you some ideas about how scientometrics can be done. If you are a researcher in any field of study, I guess you can use scientometrics and bibliometrics as a tool to investigate the trends and evolution of your research, your field of research. Okay, so first things first, I'd like to share with you some ideas about research synthesis in science. And I want to contextualize scientometrics within the broader scope of research synthesis. I just wanted to say that scientometrics is not the only way of reviewing a field of research. There are many different ways, one of which is narrative reviews. The other one is systematic reviews, scoping reviews, scientometric reviews, or bibliometric reviews, and so on and so forth. I'd like to stress that in my field of research, language assessment, there have been quite a number of reviews that have been published. I will discuss them in details in the next slide. When you look at these narrative reviews, you would find out that basically there are no research questions or pre-specified aims by researchers, and the researcher who embarks on this sort of review basically aims to find some high quality articles or studies in their personal view that are relevant, meaningful, and important. In other words, the idea of quality or importance is determined by the researcher who is conducting the review, and there's typically no objective way of measuring the impact of the paper. That's why from person to person, the content and the focus and scope of narrative reviews are different across different fields. In your own field, you might be able to find some narrative reviews, and you can read them through the lenses of what I'm presenting in this study. The other type of research synthesis articles consist of systematic reviews. You may have read, about systematic reviews. You may have written systematic reviews yourself. As you know, in systematic reviews, there is a pre-specified set of criteria to address specific research questions by researchers. In these reviews, we typically use quantitative tools, such as meta-analysis. So meta-analysis is one of the tools that is used in systematic reviews. I'm emphasizing this because lots of time, some of my students ask me, what's the difference between a systematic review or a meta-analysis? Meta-analysis is just a tool. Another tool is clustering. Clustering is visualized in the same slide that you are looking at. On the right-hand side, you will see that we have conducted the clustering method here in one of the papers that we published in the journal Language Testing in 2020, which was about Roche measurement. We basically conducted a systematic review of Roche measurements in language assessment. If you're asking me, what is Roche measurement, if you're not familiar with it, it's a quantitative technique to validate language assessment or all other kinds of tests. So clustering is one method that is used in systematic reviews, as well as meta-analysis and so on. Now, let me move on to the third type of research synthesis studies, which is scoping reviews. Scoping reviews are very extensive and kind of labor-intensive and really time-consuming, and they aim to identify the scope and extent of an available literature or to address some research questions. They involve a broad search of the literature and may include both quantitative and qualitative studies. And they could also take a narrative format, depending on how the researchers want to conduct and report the results of the study. And last but not least is what I'm focusing on today, which is scientometrics or bibliometrics reviews, which refers to the way of measuring and analyzing the impact of research primarily. So you have to measure and analyze extensive literature through mostly quantitative methods and computational methods, but you could also add on some qualitative perspectives as well, although qualitative studies are not at the core of scientometrics and bibliometric reviews. Now, I want to pivot to narrative reviews because they're so common in the field of language assessment. As Dr. Nihar mentioned, my field of research is in language assessment, so I hope you don't mind if I give you a little bit of background about these types of reviews in my fields. In your mind, you can then compare what we have in the field of language assessment with your own field of research, and if you like, you can share with me during Q&A time. There are quite a few narrative reviews in the field of language assessment, such as, for example, the two-part review written by Alderson and Banerjee, the paper written by Bachman in the year 2000, and Davis, Bernard Spolsky, who is basically a historian of language assessment research field, and Cyril Ware, Skeon, and so on and so forth. This is basically not an exhaustive list. So how are narrative reviews written? They're primarily based on the provision of expert intuitions, experiential and explicit perspectives in focused topics. They're very useful because you kind of have a window into the brain or into the mind of the author of the paper, and you know how this person, who is typically an influential person in the field, is thinking about that field of research. But it has limitations, such as it doesn't have any databases. It doesn't typically use any well-articulated methodology. The results are primarily quantitative, so you cannot generalize the results beyond the paper that you are reading most of the time. Narrative reviews in language assessment typically slice the history of language assessment into discrete approaches. For example, according to these reviews, in some era, many years ago, the psychometric structuralist approach to language testing was common. So just imagine that that's one important slice of language assessment research. And then, according to this perspective, the second or the successive historical era starts right after this psychometric structuralist era ends. And when the second one ends, the third one ends. So in a sense, these slices of history are concatenated beside each other to create what we call the history of language assessment. Bernard Spolsky himself, who, like I said, is a historian in the field of language assessment, according to him, has done quite a few influential reviews of the same nature. But in 2017, he wrote a book chapter in which he kind of critiqued this approach. He said that the records of advancement in language assessment is not necessarily the same as those slices that we create. And the slices are some form of construct that may not have some realistic embodiments in the field of language assessment. So the question has always been, and for myself, how we can create a more objective way of looking into the field. Before I go on to answer that question, and I believe you already know the answer is through scientometric research, I wanted to also highlight this paper, which was published by Chang and Plosky in 2023, because I mentioned all these 4 types of research synthesis studies. Actually, there are a lot more than 4 types. In this paper, you will find a list and explanation of 13 different types of research synthesis in the field of applied linguistics. Okay, so let's move on to the answer to the question. The answer to the questions that I raised is we can do a more extensive and objective analysis and investigation of the research that has been published through scientometrics. Now, the question is, what is scientometrics? Scientometrics is known as science of science, science mapping. Some people also use the term bibliometrics interchangeably with scientometrics. Whichever you use, these all basically refer to a field of study that is concerned with the quantitative features and characteristics of science and scientific research. The core notion in scientometrics is one thing, everybody: citation. So the whole enterprise of scientometrics is based around the idea of citation. I'd also like to share the definition by Namilov, which is as follows. The scientometrics, according to Namilov, is defined as the quantitative methods of the research on the development of science as an informational process. I guess someone is writing on the screen. I don't know if you could perhaps remove those writings on the screen, those scribbles. Anyway, the main themes that are covered under scientometrics include the following. They're basically ways of measuring research quality and impacts, understanding the process of co-citation, mapping scientific fields, as well as the use of indicators in research policy and management. So these are some of the applications of scientometrics across various fields of research. All right, so, okay, my slides now is full of lines, and I don't know how to remove these lines, but I suppose someone was just probably playing around with some of the facilities in Zoo. I hope we can erase these lines. Nihar, I'm wondering if it's possible to erase these lines. I mean, I don't know.
Right now, I don't think it is possible because they slide with you.
Okay, so but you can see those lines as well, right?
Yeah, it is.
All right, okay, I don't know where they're coming from. Anyway, so scientometrics is a review tool, everybody. As I mentioned, it overlaps with the concept or the field of bibliometrics. So both bibliometrics and scientometrics are used to evaluate the impact of particular publications or researchers in that field. They're also used to identify key authors, key journals, key publications that are related to specific areas of research. Specifically, what I would like to highlight today in this presentation is how scientometrics can be used to identify trends and patterns in scientific research. And as a result, I would claim later that Scientometrics can serve as a source of information for a literature review, particularly in cases where systematic search of the literature may be challenging because of the sample size of the papers. Just imagine that you want to do a systematic review of 50,000 papers. That's almost impossible. And you need to have a very, very large group of researchers who are well-trained, and you have to establish some measures of objectivity across all researchers. So the way that one researcher reviews the papers is not very different from the way that another researcher reviews it. And this is very challenging. Also, it's also cognitively challenging. Just imagine that we review 50,000 papers. We collect a lot of information from these 50,000 papers. Then the point is, how are we going to convey the information and the knowledge that we have mined from these 50,000 papers in a way that is not cognitively overwhelming to researchers from different backgrounds? So the technique that I'm going to stress today to address this limitation in the scientometrics research is called co-citation analysis. Some of you may have heard of co-citation analysis. Some of you may have used it already in your projects. The point is, the co-citation analysis is used to identify clusters of related research and establish connections between different streams of work within a field. So for those of you who have just joined the presentation, I should say, if you see these strange lines on the screen, I'm not sure where they came from, but okay, I'm actually trying to find a way to erase them. Okay, actually I found a way.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just found a way. There's an eraser which actually allows us to. Okay. All right, so I'm going to move on to the next slide. Everybody, sorry for the distraction. I just thought it would be a better idea to remove those lines so you will not be distracted. So co-citation analysis is what I'm going to focus on today. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. All right. The question is, what is co-citation analysis after all? In this figure, you can see how papers are co-cited and how papers cite them. Let's focus on the figure. As you see at the bottom, there are two types of, there are two papers, document 1, which is document A, and document B. These two papers are cited by 3 other papers which are on top, documents C, D, and E. So they create a kind of small cluster in this image. The cluster consists of 2 types of papers. The papers that have been cited, that's paper A and B. The papers that are citing, or you can refer to them as citers. So this small cluster basically is something that we can mine some information and knowledge from. Then I will explain how that can be done. Therefore, this is the basic idea under co-citation method. So co-citations are defined as the frequency with which 2 documents like A and B are cited together, not separately, but cited together by other documents. So remember that this is somewhat different from bibliometric coupling. If you're asking what's the difference between bibliometric coupling and co-citation analysis, bibliometric coupling is in a sense the opposite of co-citation analysis or co-citations. So if we have time during Q&A, I'm happy to go through more detail. It's also different from citation in the sense that citation does not consider the idea of co-citation, meaning that it doesn't consider whether this paper has been cited together with other papers in some references. The more co-citations 2 documents receive, the higher their co-citation strength, and as a result, the more likely they are thematically and semantically related, which means that there is a reason why documents A and B are being cited by documents C, D, E, or if they keep being cited together in other papers by documents G, E, F, H, I, whatever. So it means that there is a strong connection between the themes or the content of these papers. I mean, it's likely to have such a strong connection between these two papers that are co-cited. So the more they're co-cited, the stronger they are in terms of the relationship between the two. This idea can also be generalized beyond documents, and as a result, in scientometrics and co-citation analysis, we can not only investigate document co-citation analysis in the way that I explained, but you can also investigate author co-citation analysis, which refers to the co-citation of two authors in the same papers, or journal co-citation analysis, which, as you can imagine, refers to the co-citation of two or more journals in the same batch of papers. In the same way, you can think about the analysis of countries, the analysis of institutes. So if researchers from Institute A are cited, can we also find researchers from Institute B being cited in the same corpus of papers? And if they're being cited together, what does that really mean about the impact or the cumulative impact of these institutes on that field of research? Scientometrics also allows you to create very beautiful and meaningful visualizations. For example, what I'm going to present today is timeline and time zone views, but in other papers, I've also presented dual map overlay, which is another kind of bird eye view way of looking the relationship between different fields of research. If you are interested to learn more or to read more about dual map overlay, our paper published in 2021 by myself and Ang, which was published in Computer Assisted Language Learning, provides you with one example of dual map overlay. But for today's presentation, and in the interest of time, I would only focus on timeline and time zone views in this presentation. Let me now give you an illustrative example of what is document co-citation analysis, author co-citation, and so on. From the top of this list of references, which I got from Chen 2005, you can see that as an example, Green and Harvey have been cited together in this list. So we can say that these authors are co-cited. This is an example of co-citation, author co-citation. In fact, everyone on this list is an example of author co-citations. In addition, for document co-citation, you can see that the document in blue by Kessler, published in 1995, and another one by North in 1999, have been co-cited together. So this is an example of document co-citation. And finally, this can be applied to journals as well. The Journal of Anxiety Disorder, I guess, and Journal of Trauma Stress and something like that have been cited together. And as a result, we refer to this as an example of journal co-citation. And you can extend this idea beyond the idea of ACA, DCA, and JCA. So I hope this is clear. And with this in mind, I'm going to move on to the second half of this presentation, which is about citations and their significance in scientometrics. I have chosen this quotation from this paper, which I believe provides a very good overview of and a very good synthesis of whatever I have presented so far. So it allows me to move on to the next part of the presentation. It reads as follows: the act of citing another person's research provides the necessary linkages between people, ideas, journals, and institutions to constitute an empirical field or network that can be analyzed quantitatively. Furthermore, the citation also provides a linkage in time between the previous publications of its references and the later appearances of its citations. So it beautifully synthesizes the ideas that I have presented so far, from which now we can move to my next slide, which is the question of Clusters. As I presented before, when you find some groups of papers that have been co-cited together, plus their citing papers, we have a cluster. We have a cluster of people, of researchers, of journals or whatever that have something in common between them. Now, the question is, how can we characterize a cluster that emerges in scientometric and, for example, co-citation analysis? The answer is that we need to look into the content and properties of the cluster. And in order to find out what characterizes the content and properties of the cluster, there are a few aspects that we need to take into account. Number one, the hierarchy of keywords in the articles that cite the cluster. So those citing papers, you need to look into the key terms that they use, or the key ideas, if you will. The second one is the prominent members of the cluster as the intellectual milestones in its evolution and as the intellectual base of the specialty. The term intellectual base is an important one, so I'm going to explain this a little bit in the next slide. 3 is the recurring themes in the citing articles to the cluster to reflect the interrelationships between the intellectual base and the research front. In particular, we will pay attention to the following: indicators of the evolutionary stages of the specialty, such as the original conceptualization, research instruments, applications, and routinizations of the domain of the knowledge domain or domain of knowledge of the specialty. This slide is packed with information, and I hope it is not confusing. There are 2 terms that I need to elaborate. One of them is the intellectual base, and the other one is research front. That's something that I'm going to elaborate later in the following slide. Another thing that we need to take into account is some researchers like Xiaomei Chen himself, who is a developer of Sitespace, that's the scientometric package that I use in my research, suggests that scientometric analysis and co-citation analysis may not be sufficient. We do need to have a meta theory which allows us to make sense of the evolutionary stages of those clusters that emerge. So the framework that he proposes consists of these 4 stages. According to some philosophy of science theories or hypotheses, if you will, a field of science goes through 4 stages, as I have highlighted here at the bottom of the slide: the original conceptualization of new ideas, research instruments, the applications and routinizations, and then again the emergence of original ideas and conceptualization. So if you like to read more about this idea and create a kind of meta-theoretical framework for your scientometric analysis, I suggest that you look at Chen and Song's 2017 paper, which is really a wonderful one. Okay, I have indicated 2 major concepts, and I believe they're important for us to learn about scientometrics. One concept is called research front, and the other one is called intellectual base. Again, just to jog your memory, if you have already forgotten that because there was just too much information presented in the previous slide, we want to look into a cluster or the different clusters that emerge in our scientometric analysis. So we need to have some good way of making sense of the clusters. One of the things that we need to take into account is the idea of research front. What is a research front? Right here in the left-hand side of this slide, you can see that a research front is a representation of a cluster of studies that are highly co-cited, and as a result, they seem to have novel ideas. Another feature of research fronts is the fact that they're transitory in nature. So it's like bubbles, some new bubbles of research, in a sense, influential or impactful research studies that just appear, and they have a short lifespan, and then they may fizzle out as a result of the emergence of another research front in the field. Another feature of those clusters is known as intellectual base, which is basically anything that is cited by the research front. So let me simplify this concept for you. if you find those research funds or basically highly influential or highly co-cited papers, you just scroll down to their references list. The reference list is referred to the intellectual base. So that's why we define as anything that's cited by these research funds, which is basically the references that's found in the research fund. Now, I have presented one very commonly used definition of research fund here, which is revolving around the idea of highly cited, co-cited papers. But this is not the only definition in town. There are other definitions as well that I would like to share with you. And one definition, excuse me, if you allow me, let me remove these lines and gosh, okay, they're a bit confusing here. Okay, I just removed them. Back to these slides. Intellectual base and research funds, I was saying, are particularly the research funds are basically determined with reference to the number of highly co-cited papers. Okay. Now, that's not the only way of identifying research funds. There are quite a few other ways, three of which have been reviewed by Chen in his great paper published in 2006. So what are these three ways? The first one was something that I already mentioned, by clustering, by looking at the clusters of co-cited articles. The second way is a combination of co-cited articles and all articles that cite the cluster together. This is something that is commonly used by many researchers, actually. And finally, something that I personally haven't seen that much in research in Scientometrics is research funds are characterized as a cluster of articles that cite a common group of articles. Anyway, regardless of which one you choose for your research, here's the point. If we define a research fund as a state of the art of a specialty, that is a line of research, what is cited by research fund forms its intellectual base, as I mentioned before. And here at the bottom of this slide, you get to see the citation of the paper written by Xiaomi Chen, which I suggest that you read it if you're interested to learn more about research funds and intellectual bases. So let's move on to the next slide, which is still about research funds and intellectual base. But in this slide, what I'm going to do is to wrap up everything for you. And I needed to explain this in some details because this is really a very important idea. Okay, according to Chen, the intellectual base and research funds in a co-citation network can be described as follows. Research funds are the cutting edge and emerging topics in a research domain in highly co-cited papers. They indicate recent and rapidly evolving research activities in a field of research, and they're identified by clusters of more recent articles, authors, concepts that exhibit a high level of co-citation with each other. But here's the point, everyone. This is a very important one. I want to highlight it. They are less connected to the established intellectual base. And this is the coolest thing about research funds, because they could be a harbinger of a groundbreaking line of research in that field, which would be very beneficial to the humanity and our planet Earth. Who knows? But that's a good thing about research funds. Or it could be just a transitory research sensation that some people developed because some research idea is cool, but after a while it could be just forgotten. If you are in the field of social sciences, this can happen a lot. The ideas fizzle in and fizzle out without being validated properly. And that's one of the limitations of social sciences, actually. All right, so research funds, in a nutshell, represent new directions and potential breakthroughs in the field and can be valuable for identifying research opportunities and trends. On the other hand, intellectual base, which refers to a set of core articles or authors that have been widely cited, especially by the research funds, are basically the resources for which the research funds which are cited by research funds, and as a result, they're like the fuel for the research fund that has just emerged. Now, I talked a lot about the theoretical frameworks and the fundamental concepts in scientometrics. So I'm going to move on now to some empirical ideas that, if you're writing a paper, I believe can be of some use in writing your paper. So let's say you have done your scientometric analysis and you have looked at the output of your software, and you're just confused by so many outputs there, so many statistics and indices, and you're asking yourself, how can I report all of these statistics? What can I do? What is the framework that I can use in order to pull together all of these statistics and create that cohesive and cogent narrative to make sense of all of it? Well, here is the first thing that you should look into, everybody. Look at the temporal metrics of your network. And number two, look at the structural metrics of your network. What are they? The temporal metrics consist of two statistics, and they can be generated by the software site space, which I just mentioned. The first one is citation burstness, and the other one is sigma. Citation burstness refers to a sudden increase in the citation count of a publication, and the other one is sigma, which refers to an indicator of scientific novelty. And the larger the sigma index, the more novel the paper is. And in Chen and his colleagues' paper 2009, and in a few other papers, they have shown that, for example, the sigma metric of Nobel Prize winners is extremely high, much higher than anyone else in the field. So that indicates some form of novelty is found in the work that these people have published. The second group of metrics refers to as structural metrics. And what are they? The first one is the average silhouette score. And those of you who have done social network analysis or clustering, machine learning, and things like that should be very well familiar with silhouette statistic. Silhouette index refers to the following: the homogeneity or accuracy in clustering, which ranges between -1 and +1, with values closer to 1, suggesting high precision in clustering, while 0 basically suggests that the publication that has been clustered within one group of papers basically has been clustered wrongly and belongs to another cluster. Maybe it belongs to two clusters. It's right on the borderline. But if you get a -1 or anything minus, it definitely suggests that there is an error in your clustering. So there is strong evidence for you to rerun the analysis again to make sure that your clustering is not wrong. Silhouette index is a very important index in scientometrics. The next one is modularity Q, and this refers to a measure of clustering quality, or whether the network can be broken down into discrete clusters. It ranges between -1 and +1, with indices closer to 1, suggesting high quality in clustering, pretty much like the silhouette index. And finally, the betweenness centrality index, which is also used in social network analysis, which refers to the degree to which a node is situated between two or more nodes in a given network. In this context, high betweenness centrality statistic indicates high impact and potentially revolutionary ideas. Okay, some more ideas about silhouette index, because it's a very useful index. I don't know if you're using Python for doing your research. There is a library in Python which is called Silhouette Visualizer. I hope this makes you more interested in using Silhouette Visualizer if you have not used it before. We're looking at two scenarios here which have been generated by Silhouette Visualizer library in Python. On the left-hand side, you will see a silhouette plot which emerged in k-means clustering, not necessarily scientometrics, but it is using k-means clustering as well, which portrays a very good network. Why is that? Because we don't have any negative statistics. Everything falls above 0, as you can see from the left-hand side. And most of these, if not most, many of these statistics fall above 0.5, maybe 0.52 or something like that. On the other hand, on the right-hand side, we're looking at a network in which there are quite a few negative silhouette statistics, which means that these people, whoever they are, whatever they are, maybe they're not people, have been misclassified, and as a result, the analysis should be done again to arrive at a better solution. But here's the thing. Every average all the silhouette statistics of all members of one cluster and have one average silhouette index for that cluster. So in this cluster, in this network, we've got 5 clusters, and as a result, we could generate 5 average silhouette scores. Unfortunately, in site space, I haven't been able to find the silhouette statistics per publications, but fortunately, silhouette statistics for the entire network and for each of those clusters is generated. Okay, so that's about the statistics that we need to report. And now the question is, overall, how do I report the entire scientometric study? How do I pull together all of these statistics and provide a good report, something that reviewers would read and would be happy with? One of the things that we need to do is to combine visualizations and numbers or statistics. So here is one example of some visualization that, with the help of my research assistant, I created in 2020, which was published in the journal System. The citation is here at the bottom of the slide. You can see it's known as, the title is A Review of Comprehension Subskills, a Scientometric Perspective. So visualization becomes extremely important in scientometric research, and I would like to give you more examples of this. Okay. And we have got a new line there. And you know what I'm going to do with that line? I'm going to just erase the line, so you will not be distracted by it. All right, everybody. Now, here is a framework that provides you with steps in scientometrics to pull together all your data. I suggest the following. The first thing what we do in a research study is to define the research parameters. The second step would be identifying publications and creating databases or data sets. 3 is to visualize the intellectual structure of the chosen field. 4 is to assess the quality of the network. 5 is to do network comparisons. I should also add that network comparison is not commonly done in scientometric research. It's a method that we suggested in a paper that my PhD student, Julian Zhu, and I published in the journal Target. If you'd like to learn more about network comparison, that's the paper. I mean, you can have a look at this paper. The sixth step is determining significant research clusters, and finally, characterizing research clusters, which is probably the most challenging part. All right, so let's go through this. I'm going to present them through examples. And the examples that I'm going to present are from these 2 papers primarily. One on the one on the left-hand side was a collaboration between our team here at NIE and Professor Chaomei Chen, the developer of SiteSpace, which was published in the journal Frontiers in Psychology. On the right-hand side, it's a collaboration between my PhD student, Azrifa Zakaria, and myself, which was published in Applied Linguistics Review, which is a scientometric analysis of applied linguistics research between 1970 and 2022. And the one on the left-hand side is the same thing, but about the field of language assessment. The first thing we need to do is to define the research parameters. Now, I have made quite a few videos, everyone, to explain in detail how this can be done. So this is just a screenshot of the parameters we have specified in Scopus. If you don't have access to Scopus or the Web of Science, you can use Dimensions. I believe Dimensions is free. So far, it has been free. You can just Google Dimensions, and you can look into the parameters that are there. It's a useful database. So Scopus, the Web of Science, Dimensions. There might be other databases that you can use. I'm not very much familiar with them, I'm afraid. But if you do know that there are other databases, please let me know in the chat box. Maybe write the names of those databases. Maybe it will be useful for people. Okay, so our data sets are mostly based on Scopus. The next thing we should do is to use a tool. Some of these tools are free. Sitespace used to be completely free. I'm afraid only the basic version of Sitespace is free today. It has an advanced version. It has been developed about a year ago, I guess, if I'm not wrong. And GPT Turbo 4, I'm sure you have heard about ChatGPT, but GPT Turbo 4 has been incorporated into the latest version of Sitespace, which is really useful, especially for identifying the keywords. Okay, other tools that you could use are bibliometrics, bibliometrics, BibExcel, his site, and so on and so forth. VOS Viewer is another very useful and powerful tool. I believe it's quite user-friendly and easy to use. And if you want to get a quick start to scientometric analysis, VOS Viewer is something that I would recommend. All right, so after you have transferred the data and you have fed it into your software and have run the analysis, one of the first things that you need to do is to visualize the intellectual structure of your data. That's what I always recommend, because it gives you a visual sense for how your network is doing. For example, in this network that was generated in our paper, the modularity Q index was 0.54, which is not bad. It's actually a good one. And this average silhouette index of the entire network was pretty good. It was 0.71. So we're looking at a relatively good network consisting of several clusters. The clusters have been identified by different colors, as you can see. In addition, you will be able to see the labels of these clusters just on top of each cluster or just beside it. For example, cluster number 4 is known as Rater Experience. So number 6 is Ethical Inquiry. The question is, how did we find these labels? Because there's a large number of papers in each of those clusters. How did you find them? Well, actually, Sitespace can do it automatically. I believe that VOS Viewer can also do it automatically without you having to read everything. There are different algorithms that help you to automatically label the clusters that have emerged in the analysis. 4 of them are here. Latent semantic indexing, as you can see, LSI, which is good. Log likelihood ratio, which in my experience is very good, is actually perhaps the most powerful one that I have worked with. The next one is mutual information, or MI. And like I said recently, Sitespace have incorporated GPT Turbo 4, which is a very interesting additional feature of Sitespace. You can look at these and see which one of them works the best for you. And here is another example of a visualization of the network that was created. The silhouette index here is 0.787. The modularity Q is 0.64, almost 0.65, which is pretty good. It's a powerful network in the sense that the clusters are homogeneous and they have been pretty well separated from each other. Now, this is not the only way of representing your clusters. Here is another one. This is from Sitespace itself. This is a linear representation of all those clusters of research that emerge. One of the cool things about this is that you see the different clusters whose time span or lifespan, if you will, has been represented by the line, by the linear line. For example, number 0, which is bacterial pathogen, started around 1997 or something like that, and continues to the present day. Whereas the second one has a shorter lifespan, and the one which is number 6, as you can see, is not around anymore, meaning that people are not talking about the social consequences of whatever it is, whatever this field is anymore, but the focus is on something else. So social consequences cannot be the research front. The research front here seems to be in cluster 0, cluster 1 and 2, perhaps 3, and the rest of them are not the research front. Why is that? Because people are not focusing on them anymore. So the first 3 or 4 clusters, because 0 is also a cluster, are the most outstanding research fronts in this field of research. It just quickly gives you an idea how to identify the research fronts, at least in the first round of iteration. And then you can improve the precision of your decision on whether this is a research front or not through looking at the rest of the statistics. And here is a summary of what I present. The next thing is determining significant research clusters, everyone. As you saw from the previous slide, there are many clusters. They're not just 1 or 2. How do we identify the significant clusters? Well, the good news is you don't have to do it manually. Scitespace identifies the most significant clusters for you. Typically, the first few clusters are the most important ones. The rest are not perhaps as important in the first few clusters. The most important cluster is usually labeled as 0, then followed by 1, by 2 and 3, and so on and so forth. Now, if you have a good research team, and if you like to share the responsibility of reading through the different clusters that have emerged, you can also figure out the constructs or domains that have been focused upon in those clusters. For example, here's what we did. We basically read the papers. For example, the first cluster focuses on reading primarily, and a little bit of writing, because only 5 papers have been characterized as writing, whereas cluster 1 focuses primarily on writing by 29 papers talking about it, whereas the idea of reading has been only focused on by 8 papers. So this is one way of characterizing the major clusters of your study, but this is not the only way. This was the qualitative way of looking into the ideas. The next thing that you have to consider is basically determining bursts, as I mentioned before. Bursts are those papers that are significant, or publications that are significant and have a significant influence over the field of research you're examining. For example, Buckman and Palmer in this table have a burst strength of 17.39 with a frequency of citation of 63 in their own cluster, with a centrality index of 0.11, sigma of 6.4 in cluster 0. So burst is an index of significance, as I mentioned before, and this indicates that this paper is the most significant paper. Actually, this is a book, I should say, is the most significant publication in this cluster. And its centrality index, as you can see, is 0.11, whereas the rest of those centrality statistics are much lower than this, which is another index to show that this paper is one of the central points of its own cluster, through which a lot of other papers are connected with each other. In other words, it's right at the center of attention by lots of other papers, which may otherwise not be directly related. So if you take away this book or paper, you take it away, chances are that this cluster will just collapse, or a significant part of this cluster may collapse. As a result of this, we can refer to this textbook as a textbook that has some novelty in it, as represented by its sigma stat, which is 6.4. Just keep these ideas in mind, because I have my own criticism and critique of this approach as well, which I'll get back to it very soon. I hope I'm not taking too much time, Nihar. If you think it's just taking too long, please let me know. The next one is another example in which you still see bursts and frequency and so on. Another example is from our second paper. In the interest of time, I'm going to go through it quickly. Just remember that we looked into 55 Q1 journals in this paper. The documents were close to 50,000 papers, which were published in, between 1916 and 2022. Here is the rest of the results. Like I said, site space will give you an idea whether and to what extent each of the clusters that emerge are significant and make sense. In this network, I would say the first 8 clusters are really good and large, clusters from 0 to 7, because of the size of the cluster, which is from 603 all the way down to 148. The silhouette statistics are very good. As you can see, they're close to +1. Another statistic that you can get is the mean year publication. For example, the first cluster, 0, which is the most important one, which was labeled as second language acquisition, emerged many, many years ago in 1978. Whereas the 7th cluster, number 7, emerged on average in 1992. That's the average publication year of all the papers in this cluster. Look at number 2, which is a more recent, younger sort of cluster, and it focuses on syntactic complexity, with its mean year of publication being 2005. And I can tell you, because I'm familiar with syntactic complexity, it's been one of the things, one of the constructs that researchers have been focusing on and have been using for a variety of purposes, primarily recently. It was recently in quotation marks, definitely recently if you compare it with the first cluster. Another example is this. We get more statistics. So let me just go on, and now let me criticize whatever I have said. It's not to reverse whatever I have made claim about, but it's just really to get a critical perspective on scientometrics, because it does have some limitations which we need to take into account. The first thing is citation bias. The question is, why do we cite people? Why is it that some people are cited more? Some research shows that there is a variety of reasons for this. Of course, scientific rigor is always, hopefully, the most important reason, but author reputation is also important. So it's not very clear why I am being cited. Is it because people see my name associated with a specific field a lot, so they feel if they cite my work, they have a higher chance of getting published, or for any other reasons? Journal prestige, it's very obvious. Language barriers, which might not accurately reflect the intellectual relationships between cited papers. The second one is time lag. Co-citation analysis relies on citation data, as you know. So it means that it might not capture the most recent developments and trends in a research field. So if a paper was published just most recently, you may not be able to see so many publications for this research paper on average. So you got to give it more time, 5 years, 10 years, and you will begin to see more citations. And sometimes a very good paper that would otherwise be revolutionary or influential is totally forgotten. In the future, like 3 decades later, some researchers find it, and they put the spotlight on it, and they start talking about the idea that was forgotten. These are known as sleeping beauties. So it depends on if you are real lucky enough to be found by a very well-known researcher who then found your idea to be interesting, but was in the past was forgotten. So you see, a lot of other things are involved in citations. Neglect of non-cited literature. Co-citation analysis does not account for important works that are not cited, such as foundational literature or works that have influenced research indirectly in some other ways. An example I can give you is in some of the highly cited papers that I presented just a few seconds ago. There are some books that seem to be presenting novel ideas, but unfortunately, the ideas are primarily adapted from other sources, and they do not cite those sources. I know this because it's my field, and I know how people, the ideas, how people cite ideas, how people create frameworks. I'm sure you also know this in your own field. So sometimes some ideas are presented, but the major source of that idea is missing in the book or in the paper. That's another problem. Inability to discern citation context. This is very important. People are cited for a variety of purposes. Sometimes citations are negative. They're not always positive. Sometimes they're just neutral. And if we really want to measure the quality of a paper, we need to take into account whether the citation was positive, was negative, or was neutral. Recent machine learning approaches and AI-based approaches have started to address this problem in co-citation analysis. And finally, difficulty in detecting interdisciplinary connections. Co-citation analysis on its own might not always capture connections between different disciplines or research areas. However, in CiteSpace, there is something which is called dual map overlay, which I mentioned before, and you can use the dual map overlay to address this question. As I mentioned before, in the paper we published in computer-based language learning, we have presented a good example of dual map overlay, which addresses this problem. Finally, vagaries of publish or perish. You have heard this, right? There's a problem with this ideology because researchers may prioritize quantity over quality, and researchers may create it may create immense pressure on academics. Those of you who are being put up for promotion and tenure probably understand this and feel this immense pressure on you because the citations are important, the number of publications are important, and where you publish those papers, if you're publishing papers, is also extremely important. So the culture of publish or perish is everywhere. I should also say that it's also at our university, and definitely this is not an exception. Every university I have been working with, as a consultant or as a visitor, and so on and so forth, do embrace this culture, and they implement it in their research and measuring the impact of research by their scholars. Okay, so what are other potential reasons for high citations? Of course, the good reason would be novelty and innovation of the idea. It has to have novel idea, but based on my own experience, I can tell you that if you really care about citations, and if you want to write a paper to get higher citation statistics, methodological papers, review articles, and controversial papers can receive higher citations. But I should also stress that this should never be the reason why we do research, because that will be a waste of resources, waste of time, and so on. But research shows that methodological papers do receive lots of citations. Review papers in the same way, they receive lots of citations, but they may not necessarily introduce any novel ideas. By nature, they can attract the luck magnets, they can attract more citations to themselves. Controversial papers, let's say you write a controversial idea and you publish it in a prestigious journal, then people don't like it, then some people like it, then you start to receive different different reactions to it. Through those reactions, you're getting more citations. That's another way of doing it. However, my last idea for today, please remember that it's not just these ideas that can predict citation counts. There are many other things that are so silly, but so influential that is mind-boggling. In the first place, there are not epistemological reasons. they're not scientific reasons why some paper receive higher citations. Now, together with one of my MA students, we have been looking into this question. And in the field of applied linguistics, we found that around 23% of the variance in citation counts of highly cited papers is explained by purely non-epistemological reasons, such as what? Such as the length of the title of the article, or whether or not the paper is a textbook or is a paper. The publication is a textbook or a paper, and so on. So there are some reasons like that, which surprisingly can have an influence over the number of citations that you receive. Not to mention that the university from which the paper is contributed to the journal, co-authors, if you're working with a co-author who is well known as a significant figure in the field, you have a higher chance of getting cited, and so on and so forth. These reasons are all important to take into account when you are doing co-citation analysis. So if you see bursts, if you see highly cited papers, we should not immediately conclude that this is an influential paper in the sense that it made a novel contribution to its own field. It could be due to any reasons. So that's why we still need to do some qualitative analysis, which unfortunately are almost always subjective. Okay, and last but not least, as I mentioned, or maybe that was Nihar who mentioned it, I do have a YouTube channel, which is called Statistics and Theory. And in this YouTube channel, I have made quite a number of videos, around 171 videos that are available to the public in a playlist. I have provided how to do videos in which I explain everything in detail, how to create a network, how to do use site space for analysis, and so on and so forth. So if you don't have any other sources, and if you're looking for it, basically this is one thing that I would recommend. And if you like to watch these videos and if you like them, you can subscribe to it if you like. So here is, let me see, where is the chat box? In the chat box, I'm going to leave the link to my YouTube channel there. Oh, there's nothing else that is left, I guess, in this presentation, everyone. I just wanted to thank you again for taking the time to attend this talk, and thank Dr. Nihar for inviting me to this event today. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Vahid, for the excellent presentations. You have really covered a lot of things, and based on your practical experience, you have covered the research synthesis in science, research front, intellectual base, a lot of the free tools that can be used for the proper visualizations. Well, many participants, they have requested for the practical demonstrations. So I hope when we'll get time again, we'll do it only for the practical demonstration how to extract the data, and they can analyze it and visualize it properly.
Sure, yeah, I hope so too, yes.
So I was looking at this chart also. Many presentations, participants are requested for that only. So we can take some questions. Sinhasis, if you have any questions, can you please go through it?
Sure.
So there is a question from Badal Kumar Thakur, who's asking, what kindly elaborate in simple terms the difference among these keywords or concepts: statistical bibliography, bibliometrics, scientometrics, informatics, webometrics, and all metrics.
Right. Well, these terms are always confusing. Thank you for the question. And I'm not sure if there is a universally agreed upon way of defining these terms, but here's the thing. Scientometrics is used for measuring impact and identifying trends in research. Bibliometrics is sometimes used in, interchangeably with scientometrics. So you could say that they are synonymous, But bibliometrics is not exclusively used for measuring impact and identifying trends in research. It's also used for other purposes that librarians know a lot more than I do, and Nihar is in a much better position to tell you how librarians use this kind of data. But bibliometrics is not just to measure impact. Now, statistical bibliometrics is basically, well, the techniques that I presented, for example, co-citation analysis and stuff like that. What was the other term? Sorry.
Or the general things, the scientometrics, the informatics, gravimetrics, and all that.
Okay, so infometrics and all that. I can give you this citation, and I suggest you have a look at this paper. I think it will be very helpful. Let me find it in a second. Okay, I found it. Milosevic and Ladestrov. Where is that? In the chat box. There we go. It's one of the papers where you can find some differentiation between some of these fields. I actually read it recently, and I found it very useful.
Thank you. Shinu have a question. Shinu have a question. How we can check a wrong impact factor for some journal? Mostly some places it is mentioned we see cost the cost actually. I think she asking only how can check the wrong impact factors of some journals.
Sorry, I didn't exactly catch the question.
Yeah, also understand properly. What is research metrics? Polmani Banerjee is asking. Research metrics.
Research metrics.
Or the co-citations analysis or scientometric is the same.
Are co-citation and what else?
Co-citation analysis and the scientometric are the same.
Co-citation analysis is basically one technique that you would use in the field of scientometrics. It's one of the major techniques that are used, that is used in scientometrics.
Naveen asked which kind of tools is the best for scientometric analysis?
Which type of tools, huh?
Tools, yeah.
Okay, so let me just give you a link to that as well. This is the tool that I use. And by the way, this is a tool that I have introduced in my YouTube channel. And you can use it. This is called Sitespace. Here you can find it in the chat box. I just left it in the chat box there. Oh, sorry. I guess I'm not sending these. All right. I'm not sending these to everyone. Let me see. Everyone.
You can send to everyone. Yeah.
Okay, so I send it to everyone. This is it.
Yeah. Now it is.
And there is one. What else did I send? Okay, the name of the authors. Oh gosh. Sorry, I didn't send the name of the authors to everyone. So the name of those authors which I was talking about is right here. Now it's in the chat box.
At that time, Saloni asked that if there is any software to identify the centrality of the keyword.
Sorry, I was just a bit distracted with these things. Okay, and that's the YouTube channel address, everybody. I'm sorry, I was just sending it to Nihar only. Now it's available to everyone. Can you say that again, please? Can you, the question is?
That one. Yeah. Is there any software to identify the centrality of keyword?
Any short way?
Centrality of the keywords. Again, see Jacques says.
Oh, yeah, right.
And also to identify the trend, then we can need the centrality like the between the betweenness and against closeness centrality.
All right, I see what you mean. Centrality of keywords in site space. Yeah, you can do keywords analysis in site space, and you can also get some measure of centrality, but I'm not very much sure, because you can definitely do that for documents, for authors, for journals, and I infer based on that, since keyword analysis is possible in site space, I infer based on that it could be, at least statistically, it's not impossible. I'm not sure if site space can do that, but you can give it a try. Just install site space and see if it can help you with that. I'm sorry, I've never done that, but that's a great question.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
I think we have running later.
Yes,
So now it's time to go for the vote of thanks. And any questions, if you have, then you can share with me or you can share with the Vahid. So we can reply accordingly. Now I request Synopsis to give the vote of thanks.
I just wanted
Good
to.
afternoon, everyone.
Yeah, sorry.
On behalf of Central Library.
Yeah. 1 minute. Yeah, Vahid, would like to.
Now, excuse me, I didn't hear you well, so I was interrupting Professor. So yeah, please go ahead. I apologize. Go ahead.
So good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Central Library IISER Berhampur, it is my privilege to extend a vote of thanks to each and every one of you who has joined us today for this insightful and engaging webinar on Scientometrics. First and foremost, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to our esteemed speaker, Dr. Vahid Aryadoust. Your profound knowledge, thorough insights, and the clarity with which you conveyed the complex subject of scientometrics have been incredibly enlightening. Your presentation has not only deepened our understanding, but also sparked a keen interest in this subject. Thank you for taking the time to share your expertise with us today. I would also like to extend our heartfelt thanks to our respected director, Professor Ashok Ganguly, sir. Your unwavering support and encouragement have been instrumental in making this webinar possible. A special thanks to our dedicated librarian, Dr. Nihar Patel, sir, whose meticulous planning and organization have been crucial in the seamless execution of this event. Your commitment to enhancing our library services and promoting educational initiatives like this is greatly appreciated. To our enthusiastic participants, thank you for your active engagement and insightful questions. Your contributions have enriched our discussions and added depth to our understanding of this complex subject. Lastly, I would like to acknowledge the diligent efforts of everyone working behind the scenes. Our library team, Sai Sangita, Narendra, Arun, Rajlakshmi, whose hard work and dedication ensured the smooth running of this webinar. We also thank the Computer Center team for their technical assistance. As we conclude this session, let us carry forward the knowledge and ideas exchanged here today to further advance the field of scientometrics and contribute to the progress of scientific research worldwide. Thank you once again for your participation and valuable contributions. We look forward to your continued participation in future events. We are also happy to inform you of our upcoming webinar on technology and strategy in the academic libraries on July 3rd at 4 p.m. The speaker of the session is Ms. Sikhar Sardis, Associate Director for Technology and Strategic Planning at the MIT Libraries. We'll send the link to email later. Have a great day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Sinashish. And yes, participants will share the PPT as well as the recording versions of these presentations. And thank you all. And once again, thank you, Vahid, for this nice and great presentation. We'll be in touch, and the participants requested for the practical demonstration of the presentations. So
Sure.
whenever you get time, please give us for again 1 hour for our participants.
Absolutely.
Thank
Thank
you.
you again, Nihar, for the invitation. It was a pleasure to meet you virtually in person, and also the rest of the participants in this seminar. For practical demonstrations, yeah, I'll be happy to do that in the future. In the meantime, the videos can actually provide you with step-by-step demonstration of how to do the analysis and how to make sense of the data. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Okay. Yeah, bye. Thank you.
Goodbye. Take care.